could you please give us a self-introduction?
My name is Yesun, Y-E-S-U-N, and I'm now an assistant professor at University of Utah, teaching in Department of Communication.
Okay, and can you tell us what sessions you're participating in at ICA this year?
I'm participating in one session where I present my paper on third-person effect too, actually, but in the health communication message context. So here I am presenting on behalf of a friend, Hyang-Sao Huang. He cannot make it here because of some visa issues. So.
Okay. So third-person effect or third-person perception? Where do you fall on that line?
Both.
Yeah.
I do research on both components. They are one theoretical framework. One is more about the perceptual emphasis. The other is about how people behave on the basis of their perceptions. So.
Do you think that the perceptions are vary cross-culturally? In other words, from your understanding of the research so far, what countries, I think we see a lot of the research coming from the United States on this effect, and yet we know that there are differences cross-culturally. Different people from different cultures are going to have entirely different reactions. So where's the research in that area?
I'm not too familiar with that sort of research, but I know that people do investigate in the third-person effect in other cultural contexts. Or I think I saw a paper actually in this ICA that's about a cross-cultural comparison. But I think from what I know, or if I remember it correctly, the third-person perception is pretty robust. I think Professor An Hua and Professor Al Gunther, they did a study before using Singapore population as the sample, and they observed third-person perception pretty robustly across all message contexts.
The idea of moral outrage was highlighted in the session today on third-person effects, and this idea runs through a number of the presentations. How central do you think that moral norms are in the emergence of the third-person effect?
I think for this paper that focuses on moral outrage, it's actually a pretty new idea for third-person effect research, because before we always focus on just demonstrating that there is such a self-other difference in terms of how people estimate media effects, but we don't really go into looking at the specific cognitive or emotional route. There are a lot of studies actually so far that look somewhat into the cognitive processes, but to look into the emotional process, I think this is one of the first few papers that has ever done so. So it's very interesting, and I think it does make sense logically that if we think the children are harmed by violent video games or the sexual explicit content on the media, then that goes against our moral principles, and we want to protect them, and we feel outraged. So I think that is indeed a pretty good mediator to look at.
I know that one of the ways we take a look at third-person effect is to do surveys. We ask people, and a lot of times they say, it's true for others, but not true of myself. How else are we getting at this third-person effect other than self-reporting?
That's a very good question, and I don't know. I mean, so far, most of us use surveys as the instrument to ask people. Self-report measures are used a lot across all different domains of studies, and it does have its own problems. So we may look into different ways in the survey. I mean, so whether you ask questions on the effect on self and effect on others separately, or you put the comparison on the scale to force them to do a direct comparison. So there should be different ways to go about doing this and see whether the results are consistent, or we should just be more innovative and think about other ways to capture this phenomenon.
One of the things I think as researchers we all like to do in the final chapter is to give a nod to maybe other researchers or graduate students who are coming up, where they should be placing their research attention. Where would you say in this area we should be looking?
Well, first of all, I think we should definitely do more careful or specific theorizing about what goes on in the process. So instead of being satisfied saying, okay, we're all thinking others are more influenced by than us, but why is that happening? And there has been studies already that tries to propose different explanations and test them, but I think there is not a systematic explanation yet, or the results are still kind of inconsistent. So I think we should do more theorizing about that part, especially regarding the behavior component, like why people indeed go out of their way to act on their perceptions. That's a very interesting part to the third-person effect paradigm, but not many people yet look at why this is happening. So what is the underlying motivation for people to do that, or just outline or test more conditions, under what conditions people may go out to do things, under what conditions people may not. So that sort of theorizing, I think, is still lacking in the existent literature, existent research. So.